The story opens with a compelling hook that immediately grabs the audience's attention. A woman in casual attire, specifically a dark gray sweatshirt and sweatpants, is humiliated and forced to leave the first-class cabin of a commercial flight. The flight attendants, judging her solely on her appearance, assume she doesn't belong among the premium passengers despite having a valid first-class ticket. What the flight crew doesn't realize, and what creates the dramatic tension that propels the narrative, is that this seemingly ordinary woman is Olivia Bennett, whose husband Alexander Bennett is a billionaire who recently acquired the entire airline. This revelation is withheld from both the flight crew and the audience initially, creating anticipation for the moment when her true identity will be revealed. The introduction effectively establishes the central conflict of the story: appearance-based discrimination and prejudice in customer service. It also foreshadows the speechless reaction that will come when the truth is revealed, promising the audience a satisfying moment of justice or accountability. The narrative voice uses phrases like, "What happened next left everyone speechless," to directly engage the audience, creating a sense of anticipation and inviting viewers to continue watching the story unfold. This framing device positions the audience as witnesses to an important lesson about judgment and fairness that will soon be delivered. By focusing on the contrast between Olivia's casual appearance and her actual status, the introduction establishes the story's central theme, that people's worth shouldn't be determined by how they look or what they wear, but rather by their character and how they treat others. The narrative takes us to Denver International Airport, where we're formally introduced to Olivia Bennett, a 34-year-old woman who moves with quiet confidence through the bustling terminal. The script carefully constructs Olivia's character through detailed descriptions of her appearance and behavior, establishing her as someone who values substance over status despite her considerable wealth. Olivia's outfit, a comfortable dark gray sweatshirt, light gray sweatpants, black cap, and a simple silver bracelet as her only accessory, is deliberately casual, contrasting sharply with what one might expect from the wife of a billionaire. This clothing choice is not incidental, but rather a conscious decision that reflects her personal values and becomes central to the story's conflict. The script reveals that Olivia is married to Alexander Bennett, described as a billionaire tech innovator, who recently acquired Summit Airlines as part of his expanding transportation empire. This information, known to the audience but not to the other characters in the story, creates dramatic irony that will pay off later in the narrative. Olivia's modest behavior is illustrated through small but telling details. She pays for her coffee with cash rather than using the platinum card in her phone case. She carries a well-worn backpack rather than designer luggage. She chooses a modest timepiece that had belonged to her grandmother instead of an expensive watch. These choices demonstrate her deliberate attempt to stay grounded despite her wealth. We learned that Olivia grew up in a modest household in rural Colorado and met Alexander at a tech conference where she was presenting environmental research, establishing her as accomplished in her own right rather than merely being defined by her marriage. Her decision to fly commercial instead of using their private jet is explained as a way to stay connected to the real world in ways that wealth often insulated people from, revealing her values and character motivation. The setting of Denver International Airport serves as a microcosm of society, with Olivia observing the diverse tapestry of humanity that fascinates her. Families sitting together, elderly couples holding hands, business travelers typing on laptops. This observation foreshadows her later concern with fair treatment for all passengers, regardless of their appearance or status. Through these carefully crafted details, the section establishes Olivia as a sympathetic protagonist whose unpretentious nature and genuine concern for others will drive the story's central conflict and eventual resolution. The tension escalates as Olivia enters the first-class cabin of Summit Airlines Flight 782. The luxurious setting is described in detail, gleaming with luxury, wide leather seats and deep navy blue polished wood accents, creating a sharp visual contrast with Olivia's casual attire. The confrontation begins subtly, with flight attendant Diane Phillips' practiced smile freezing slightly upon seeing Olivia. This initial reaction quickly evolves into a series of increasingly intrusive challenges to Olivia's presence in first class. First, Diane expresses doubt with her tone when directing Olivia to the first class section. Then Richard, a male flight attendant, directly asks to see Olivia's boarding pass, scrutinizing it longer than necessary. The lead flight attendant, Caroline, escalates the situation by suggesting there's some confusion with Olivia's boarding pass, implying she doesn't belong in first class. The script captures the coded language of discrimination through the flight attendant's carefully worded statements. Caroline doesn't explicitly mention Olivia's clothing, but suggests that first-class passengers typically present themselves in a manner that reflects the premium experience. Diane insinuates that Olivia might have been upgraded accidentally, making her tone clear that she finds this unlikely. As the confrontation intensifies, the reactions of other passengers become a crucial element. Some passengers watch with undisguised interest, others with detached amusement, treating the discrimination as daily theater of air travel. A distinguished older gentleman speaks up in Olivia's defense, noting that he's flown in sweatpants in first class many times without being questioned, highlighting the selective application of supposed standards. Olivia handles the situation with remarkable composure, directly addressing the bias. It's not about the ticket I purchased, but rather how I look. She points out that no other passenger has been asked to prove their identity after boarding. Her calm dignity in the face of humiliation establishes her moral authority in the confrontation. The power dynamic shifts when Caroline delivers an ultimatum: verify her identity, move to economy, or deplane. The injustice burned for Olivia, but she makes a strategic choice to avoid making a scene that would delay the flight for everyone. This decision, to move to economy while requesting the employees' names and numbers, shows her thinking beyond personal vindication toward a more systemic response. Crucially, Olivia chooses not to reveal her husband's ownership of the airline, something that would end this instantly. This choice reveals her character and principles. She has never used Alexander's name to gain advantages or special treatment. The section ends with Olivia being escorted to economy class, an escort that felt more like an expulsion, holding her head high, refusing to show how deeply the humiliation cut. This image of dignified resistance in the face of injustice sets the stage for the coming reversal of fortune. The narrative shifts to the following morning at Summit Airlines corporate headquarters, described as a glass and steel building that reflects the mountain landscape, symbolizing the company's premium position in the industry. This architectural description establishes both the corporate setting and the airline's image-conscious culture. Inside the executive suite, we meet Patricia Winters, the chief customer officer, who reviews the day's agenda with growing anxiety. The quarterly customer experience review is scheduled for 10 a.m., and the numbers aren't promising. Passenger complaints have increased by 11% over the previous quarter, with issues regarding staff attitude topping the list. This information subtly connects to Olivia's experience, suggesting a systemic problem rather than an isolated incident. Patricia's assistant delivers news that increases the stakes. The board members will be attending, and Mr. Bennett has confirmed he'll be joining in person rather than virtually. Patricia's stomach tightens at this information, revealing Alexander Bennett's reputation as a demanding leader with limited tolerance for excuses. This setup creates anticipation for the confrontation to come. In a telling moment, Patricia instructs her assistant to ensure that Caroline Reynolds and her first-class cabin crew are here, specifically because they've maintained the highest customer satisfaction scores. This ironic detail, that the very crew who discriminated against Olivia is being showcased as an example of excellent customer service, heightens the dramatic tension. The scene then shifts to Alexander and Olivia's spacious penthouse across town. Alexander is described as tailored navy suit projecting power without ostentation, preparing for the meeting. The couple's morning conversation reveals their differing approaches to handling the incident. Alexander, visibly angry, wants direct retribution. "Are you sure you don't want me to say something directly to the flight attendants?" His comment that they humiliated my wife shows his personal stake in the matter. Olivia, however, has a broader vision. "This isn't about personal revenge, Alex. It's about changing a culture." She articulates the story's central theme by explaining this is about a system that judges people based on appearances rather than character. Alexander's expression softens as he looks at his wife, admiring how she has maintained her groundedness despite the wealth that surrounded her now. This moment provides insight into their relationship and reinforces Olivia's character as someone who saw the world without the distortion of privilege. The section ends with Alexander checking his watch and confirming their plan, with Olivia stating she'll be wearing exactly what I wore yesterday, setting up the dramatic entrance to come. Meanwhile, at Summit Airlines headquarters, Caroline, Richard, and Diane sit together near the back of the conference room, completely unaware of what's about to unfold. They speculate that their invitation to this high-level meeting must be related to their consistently high performance metrics, with Richard whispering about a potential promotion to lead an elite service team. This dramatic irony, the audience knows what's coming while the characters remain oblivious, creates tension and anticipation for the revelation scene to follow. The narrative reaches its climactic turning point as Patricia Winters begins the customer experience meeting. The boardroom setting has been carefully established, board members, department heads, and key staff assembled with Caroline, Richard, and Diane seated near the back, still believing they're there to be recognized for their exemplary service. Alexander Bennett's entrance transforms the atmosphere instantly. Described as tall and commanding, with quiet confidence that came from building a tech empire from the ground up, his presence immediately commands respect. He takes his seat at the head of the table, maintaining an inscrutable expression while occasionally making notes in a small leather-bound notebook. The presentation proceeds with Patricia highlighting bright spots in their customer service, specifically praising the first-class service on transcontinental routes that has maintained a 92% satisfaction rating. This ironic setup makes the coming revelation even more powerful. In a moment of dramatic perfection, Patricia calls Caroline Reynolds to the front of the room to share some insights about their approach to premium customer service. Caroline moves confidently to the presentation position, unaware of the trap about to spring. Caroline begins her presentation with practiced professionalism. At Summit Airlines, we believe the first-class experience begins the moment our passengers step on board. She continues explaining how they're trained to recognize and accommodate the needs of our premium travelers who expect and deserve a certain level of service. The pivotal moment occurs when the conference room door opens quietly. Caroline, noticing Alexander's shifted attention, turns to see the woman in the dark gray sweatshirt, light gray sweatpants, and black cap from yesterday's flight. The script captures this moment of recognition with exquisite detail. For a moment, Caroline didn't process what she was seeing. Then recognition dawned, followed swiftly by confusion. Alexander stands and delivers the revelation with calm but devastating effect. I apologize for the interruption. I believe some of you have already met my wife, Olivia Bennett. The script describes the room freezing in a tableau of shock and dawning horror. Caroline stands at the presentation podium, her professional composure cracking like thin ice. Richard and Diane seem to physically shrink in their seats, their faces draining of color. As executives and board members look between Alexander, Olivia, and the flight attendants, trying to piece together the unfolding drama, Patricia Winters finally manages to whisper, "Your wife." Alexander confirms this with devastating simplicity, emphasizing that Olivia flew from Denver to Boston yesterday on our airline in first class, with each phrase falling like a hammer. Olivia, still dressed in the exact outfit that had deemed her unworthy of her seat, stands beside her husband. The only hint of her status is the silver bracelet on her wrist caught the light, the only hint of luxury on her person. This visual reinforces the story's theme about appearance versus reality. The section reaches its emotional peak when Alexander invites Caroline to continue her presentation about recognizing premium travelers. Caroline's composure completely disintegrates, her mouth opened and closed, no words emerging, as her carefully constructed presentation about first-class service excellence now lay in ruins at her feet. Richard's earlier smirk has transformed into an expression of pure dread. Caroline finally stammers that there must have been a misunderstanding, to which Alexander responds with pointed irony. Interesting choice of words. He then invites Olivia to describe the incident. Olivia steps forward, projecting calm purpose, in contrast to Alexander's controlled anger. She articulates the core message of the story with clarity and moral authority. What happened yesterday wasn't a misunderstanding. It was bias in action. I was judged not by my boarding pass, which was checked multiple times, but by my appearance. The section concludes with Olivia revealing the results of her research. 27 documented similar incidents in the past 3 months, transforming her personal experience into evidence of a systemic problem. This revelation hit the room like a physical force, expanding the story from a tale of personal vindication to one of organizational accountability and cultural change. The revelation of Olivia's identity and the pattern of discrimination she's uncovered creates a pivotal moment for accountability and change. Patricia Winters, visibly shaken, reaches for the folder of documented incidents with trembling hands, whispering, "I had no idea." Alexander immediately identifies the systemic nature of the problem. "That's the problem. You should have known. These incidents were reported, but they were classified as customer misunderstandings and buried in your feedback system." Caroline attempts damage control, offering professionally contrite apologies while still deflecting responsibility by referring to protocols they're expected to follow. This defensive maneuver reveals that she still doesn't grasp the fundamental issue. Olivia cuts to the heart of the matter with quiet authority. "Stop. You're still not understanding. This isn't about protocols." She directly challenges their selective application of rules with pointed questions. "When the businessman in 2C wore sweatpants in first class last month, did you ask for his ID? When the famous actress in 1A boarded in sunglasses and a baseball cap, did you question her right to be there?" These examples powerfully illustrate the discriminatory application of supposedly neutral policies. Richard, sensing his career circling the drain, attempts a final justification. "Mrs. Bennett, there was no way for us to know who you were." Olivia's response delivers the story's central message. "That's exactly the point. You shouldn't need to know who I am to treat me with basic dignity. My worth as a passenger isn't determined by my marriage, my bank account, or my clothes. I purchased a ticket like everyone else." This moment of moral clarity creates a heavy silence as the truth of her words sank in. The confrontation now shifts to the consequences phase, which reveals Alexander and Olivia's approach to justice and systemic change. Alexander first addresses the flight attendants directly. "Your actions yesterday reflected poor judgment and explicit bias. In many companies, that would be cause for immediate termination." The 3 attendants seem to brace for the inevitable, expecting to be fired. But then comes the unexpected turn. "However, firing you would solve nothing at a systemic level. It would just make us feel better temporarily, while allowing the underlying culture to remain unchanged." This approach transforms the story from a simple revenge tale to a more nuanced examination of how meaningful change occurs in organizations. Alexander announces a comprehensive solution. Starting next week, Summit Airlines will implement a comprehensive anti-bias training program for all customer-facing staff. Additionally, we're revising our customer feedback system to specifically track and address incidents involving perceived discrimination or prejudice. Olivia then delivers her own requirements for the 3 flight attendants. Temporary reassignment, 1 month working with the customer advocacy team handling passenger complaints, followed by another month in economy class service. After that, if your performance reviews indicate a genuine understanding of these issues, you can reapply for your first-class positions. This consequence is designed not as punishment but as education and perspective building. Patricia Winters, recognizing the gravity of the situation, volunteers to personally oversee these changes and suggests compensating the other affected passengers identified in Olivia's report. Alexander agrees, then drives home the moral lesson to the flight attendants. The true measure of premium service isn't how well you treat people who look important. It's how you treat everyone regardless of appearance. The section concludes with Board Chair Ella Simmons acknowledging their debt to Olivia for identifying a significant blind spot in our operation and reframing the incident as an opportunity for meaningful change. Meanwhile, Caroline, Richard, and Diane sit in stunned silence, their earlier confidence shattered, as they face not immediate firing but something perhaps more challenging, the opportunity to learn and change. This resolution avoids the easy satisfaction of punishment in favor of a more thoughtful approach to systemic change, reinforcing the story's themes about looking beyond appearances and addressing root causes rather than symptoms. The narrative jumps forward 3 months to show the lasting impact of Olivia and Alexander's intervention. Olivia is once again seated in first class on a Summit Airlines flight, specifically Seat 2A on Flight 923 from Denver to San Francisco. She's dressed in the identical outfit that had previously caused such controversy. The same dark gray sweatshirt, light gray sweatpants, and black cap. This scene serves as a perfect bookend to the opening confrontation, allowing the audience to witness the transformation in both individual behavior and company culture. As Olivia prepares for her 5-hour journey to a climate research conference, Richard approaches her seat. The first interaction immediately demonstrates change. "Good morning, Mrs. Bennett," Richard says. "Can I offer you a beverage before takeoff?" His demeanor is now professional and attentive, and his eyes hold none of the condescension from their previous encounter. Instead, there was something that looked remarkably like respect. This moment leads to a meaningful exchange where Richard acknowledges his personal growth. "Mrs. Bennett, I'm not sure if you remember me," he begins, to which Olivia responds with simple dignity. "I remember you, Richard." In a moment of vulnerability, he thanks her and admits that these past 3 months have been educational. When Olivia asks about his time in customer advocacy, he describes it as humbling, confessing, "I had no idea how many passengers felt dismissed or judged by our actions, things I never even thought about." This acknowledgement shows genuine reflection rather than mere compliance with mandatory training. The transformation extends beyond Richard. Down the aisle, Olivia notices Diane, assisting an elderly man in casual clothes, her manner patient and attentive as she helped him stow his worn duffel bag. Caroline also makes a brief appearance in the galley, exchanging a small respectful nod with Olivia. Not the exaggerated deference of someone afraid for their job, but the genuine acknowledgement between people who had moved past conflict to understanding. The narrative expands beyond individual change to describe broader systemic transformation. The changes at Summit Airlines extended far beyond these 3 flight attendants. The anti-bias training program had been implemented company-wide, from check-in counters to executive offices. The results are tangible. Customer satisfaction scores were climbing, and employee morale had improved as staff felt empowered to treat all passengers with equal respect. Even more significantly, other airlines had taken notice, with Summit's approach becoming a model in the industry, challenging long-held assumptions about how premium service should look and feel. This industry-wide impact magnifies the importance of Olivia and Alexander's intervention. As the flight reaches cruising altitude, Olivia reflects on how a single moment of injustice had catalyzed meaningful change, not through vengeance or public shaming, but through the harder, more lasting path of education and accountability. This insight articulates the story's central message about how genuine transformation occurs. Alexander texts to ask about the flight, and Olivia responds with 2 simple but powerful words: different, better. This exchange demonstrates their partnership in creating change. The section ends with 2 powerful images that embody the transformation. First, a young woman in ripped jeans and a vintage t-shirt laughed with her companion in the first-class cabin, receiving the same attentive service as the business executives around them. No second glances, no veiled comments, no subtle indicators that they somehow didn't belong. Then, in a moment of genuine connection, Caroline approaches Olivia and quietly shares, "I want you to know that what you and Mr. Bennett did, it was fair, more than fair, and it made us better at our jobs." When Olivia responds that progress, not punishment, was the point, Caroline admits, "I've learned to see people differently, to question my assumptions. It's changed how I interact with everyone, not just passengers." The epilogue concludes with Olivia's reflection on how change happens, rarely through dramatic gestures or grand statements, but through individual moments of recognition, through systems that reinforce better choices, and through leaders willing to address not just symptoms but causes. The final image reinforces the true victory. Not that Olivia can now fly first class without question, but that increasingly, so could everyone else, regardless of appearance, status, or circumstance. A simple truth, yet one so often forgotten in a world quick to judge based on superficial cues. The story employs several distinctive narrative framing devices that position it as both an entertaining story and a moral lesson for the audience. These elements create a direct connection with viewers and invite them to engage with the story's themes on a personal level. The most prominent framing device is the direct address to the viewers/readers. Throughout the narrative, but especially at the beginning and end, the storyteller breaks the fourth wall to speak directly to the audience. This technique bookends the story, appearing in the introduction with "What happened next left everyone speechless," and returning at the conclusion with reflective questions. At the story's conclusion, the narrator explicitly states the moral lesson. Stories like Olivia's remind us that true change comes not from punishment, but from understanding and accountability. This direct statement of theme ensures that viewers don't miss the intended message about judgment, bias, and systemic change. The narrative also employs interactive elements by posing direct questions to the audience. Has someone ever judged you by your appearance, or have you caught yourself making snap judgments about others? This invitation for self-reflection encourages viewers to connect the story to their own experiences, making the moral lesson more personally relevant and impactful. The storyteller uses a persuasive call-to-action approach, encouraging audience engagement beyond passive consumption. Share your experience in the comments below. This invites community building around shared experiences of judgment or bias, creating ongoing dialogue around the story's central themes. Traditional content marketing elements appear through subscription requests. If you enjoyed this story of justice and transformation, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that reflect the complexity of human dignity. This frames the story as part of a larger collection of moral tales focused on similar themes of respect, dignity, and fairness. The narrative voice establishes a sense of community with phrases like, "Join our community of viewers who believe in the power of understanding to create a more respectful world." This positions the audience not just as passive consumers, but as people who share certain values and aspirations for social change. These framing devices work together to extend the story's impact beyond entertainment, encouraging viewers to examine their own biases, consider how they judge others based on appearance, and potentially change their behavior as a result. Much like the transformation the flight attendants underwent in the story itself. Through these techniques, the narrative transforms from a simple revenge tale into a teaching moment about bias, judgment, systemic change, and the power of addressing root causes rather than merely punishing individual actions. The framing devices ensure the viewers don't just enjoy the satisfying moment when the flight attendants realize their mistake, but actually internalize the deeper message about treating all people with equal dignity regardless of appearance.